Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ha'i rab tawab la'atam za'ach yawam an Charlotte, which is good evening. This is your brother Yawan from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya hamalakath hashamayim kwa repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call laim la la abanawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rcha kodash wa mashana la zakwanim Yahweh wa mala'akim sharcha gadol, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means He exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai, delivers and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is a lesson entitled Going into Color Symbolism in the Scriptures. But I got the term color symbolism on the AI overview on Google. It says color symbolism is a subjective meaning people attach to colors, which can be cultural, biological, or personal. Over time, colors have come to represent specific meanings or life events, which can be shared universally or have cultural variations. For example, in Western cultures, white symbolizes purity and innocence, and is a traditional wedding dress color. All right, and pretty much, I want to go into this lesson because contrary to popular belief, the Lord is in fact a Hebrew Israelite. All right, and if He was walking the earth today, He would be considered a so-called black man. All right, in which the majority of the world does not want to believe that, but for truth's sake, just want to go into that, because the scriptures ultimately give us a detailed synopsis as to what the Lord Yahweh Shai Hamashayach, what He looks like. All right, so nevertheless, let's get some scriptures. But I also got this written right here. It says colors hold significance for people around the world. It says not only do colors influence emotion, but they also hold meaning in religion and various cultures. It says, i.e., color psychology. It says of the colors, white meaning innocent, illumination, and perfection, while black means mystery, evil, and death. All right, and ultimately, Esau Edom, he has used this to his benefit. But we're in the time now to where that's being exposed. All right, so let's get a couple precepts. Because again, this man has used color to his benefit. He's called he's labeled himself as the so-called white man. All right, and what does white represent? Again, it represented illumination. It represented purity. All right, it represented innocence. So he essentially gave himself that endonym. All right, which endonym is or endonym and exonym. Pretty much it's a name that's used amongst themselves and also amongst other people, but that's not ultimately the name, or that's not ultimately the nationality or actual color of Esau Edom. All right, so let's actually get that. This is Bara Ashi out the Genesis chapter 25, and we'll get verse 25. It says, "And the first came out red all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau." All right, in which Esau, the color of his blood, show forth through his skin. He's actually red. He's not white. All right. So let's also grab this. This is this is Psalms chapter 144, and we'll get verse 11. It says, "Rid me and deliver me from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaketh vanity, and their right hand is a right hand of falsehood." In which the scriptures say in Psalms the 73rd chapter, that their tongue walketh through the earth. And ultimately going into their lifestyles, that their rules and regulations. All right, and ultimately their conduct. They're essentially how they carry themselves is the vibration of what the world is carried in as well. All right, but then also their actual conversation. Their conversation goes into the different names that they have ascribed to Jake. All right, ultimately going into how right here it says, "Whose mouth speaketh vanity," because it's ultimately vain, all right, to put those different labels on themselves, and then also the Israelites, all right, who are you Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. All right, we ultimately come in all colors, but it goes back to the spirit, But nevertheless, Psalms 144 and verse 11, it says, "Rid me and deliver me from the hand of strange children, whose mouth speaketh vanity, and their right hand is a right hand of falsehood." So from the different lies that Esau Edom has perpetuated, He has ultimately done those, all right, by reason of using the right hand or falsehood. With your right hand, that's what you rely on. So essentially Esau relies on falsehood, deception, witchcraft, all right, sorcery, that ultimately going into the left hand. So pretty much it was a deception, and it was a deceit, all right, to essentially label himself as white, all right, to label the Israelites as so-called black, all right, you see. But then he also painted over the image of the Lord Yahweh Shai, all right. So nevertheless, and then also you got the it was a picture. It was supposed to be Adam, but Esau even painted over the Most High Yahweh, being that was supposed to represent the Lord Yahweh. Then also with the angels, he painted those over as if they was pale face, blue eyed devils. But even with the Russian icons, essentially it showed that the Israelites was of brown complexion. All right, and then also our Lord Yahweh Shai, all right, was of a brown complexion. All right. And then also the Lord Yahweh is of a brown complexion. Same with the angels. So this devil has ultimately painted over the images in the time of the Renaissance, and ultimately, the whole majority of the world is under that wicked vibration. All right. So let's get that too. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 10, and we'll get verse 3. It says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through the Most High to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of the Most High, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Hamashiach." So ultimately, this word is ultimately pulling down them strongholds, and one of a chief stronghold, all right, upon our people, all right, is the pale face, blue eyed devil, all right, who is JC. You see, which the Lord's true image. All right, again, he would be if he was walking the earth today, the Lord Yahweh Shai, if he was walking the earth today, all right, he would be considered a so-called black man, all right, from the tribe of Judah. All right, so let's get a couple more, because we've always been called those exonyms and those those bywords, all right, by reason of the color of our skin, which is not black, is brown, all right, and which color, again, it has a very important symbolism, all right, when it comes to different cultures, you see, because again, the different colors, it brings forth a certain emotion, so that's again, why Esau Edom has used it, you see. But again, we in a time to where the Lord is casting down those strongholds. But this is Acts chapter 13 verse 1. It says, "Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manon, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul." All right, in which, when we go into this word for it has one G, but it still goes into nigger, because it says this right here. It says black. All right, and it says a surname of a prophet, Simon, and it says black. All right, in which, when we go into this right here, NLT, it says, "Among the prophets and teachers of the church of Antioch of Syria were Barnabas, Simon called the black man, Lucius from Cyrene, Manon, the childhood companion of King Herod, Antipas, and Saul." All right, so you see, so the in the ancient world, all right, the men of the Lord, was called by those different exonyms and bywords and sharp sayings, you see, because ultimately it was a derogatory statement, all right, and that's essentially how Esau has thrived, all right, in his propaganda, by using those derogatory statements. But let's also get this, because this is ultimately what he has done in the process of time. This is Ayawab, Job 9 and verse 24 says, "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked." So the earth, all right, is ultimately in the power of Esau Edom, the so-called white man. It says he covered the faces of the judges thereof, if not where, and who is he? All right, so ultimately, during that time of the Renaissance, all right, that was where this devil essentially perpetuated that he was the Lord's people. All right, which that's not the case. All right, but again, going to the point of this devil covering the faces of the judges. All right, the judges are starting from the Most High Yahweh. Why the Lord Yahweh Shai. All right, to the Israelites. All right, those essentially represent the judges, and during that time, you know, Esau Edom has essentially covered up the images. All right. Then also with then also with the covering of the image in a spiritual way as well. All right, because uh what the true judges stand for is these scriptures. All right, Esau Edom has essentially covered over that, and ultimately made what he felt as if should go on. All right, he's made that the law of the land. All right, but nevertheless, continuing on, let's get First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 48. All right, this is First Maccabees chapter 3, and we'll get verse 48, and it says, "And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images," which you don't see. You don't see Ishmaelite JC. You don't see a Hamite JC. You don't see a Japhite JC. All of the images pretty much are that's mass produced of who the world or JC or the Lord Yahweh Shai Hamashiach, who has been painted as a pale face blue-eyed devil. That's who this world is referring to, but that's not his true image. All right, because we get the true image, all right, in Revelation, the first chapter, and the from verse 13 on down. But let's get this. This is Isaiah Yeshaya chapter 28, and we'll get verse 17. It says, "Judgment also will I lay to the lion, and righteousness to the plummet, and the hell shall sweep away the refuge of lies, and the water shall overflow the hiding place." All right, and those lies are ultimately being, swept away. All right, because this truth is likened unto water. All right, well, that water is essentially acting in a very mighty way. All right, to where again it's sweeping away those lies. All right, where Esau Edom was able to hide behind, the lies and the deception for so long. Hey, he can't hide no more. That's why the scriptures say, he's been made bare. All right. So let's get these, and I'm gonna go ahead and close. But this is Daniel chapter 10, and we'll get verse 4. Verse 5, it says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude." All right, and this is talking about the Most High Yahweh. All right, and ultimately, if you have the color of polished brass, brass is a very dark color. So he would be a melanated being. All right, and it says the voice of his words were like the voice of a multitude. He spoke with authority. All right, so let's also get this, because even when you see the picture of the JC picture, all right, with the long hair, all right, it gives you the impression that the same impression of our oppressors, all right, as if that's how the Lord would speak, you see. But the Lord don't speak, all right, like a so-called white man. The Lord is a Judite, all right, and ultimately, again, if he was walking the earth today, he would be considered a so-called black man. All right? He would speak with authority. All right, so let's also get this. This is Revelation chapter 1 and verse 13. It says, in the midst of the seven candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire." You see, so the hair like wool, all right, going into the texture, all right, and it says as white as snow. That's going into that color. It says, "And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." So if you put brass into a furnace, all right, and it burns, it's gonna be very dark. And it says, "And his voice as the sound of many waters." So the Lord spoke with authority. He spoke austerely, all right, with austerity. You see, so yeah, I just wanted to go into the color symbolism in the scriptures. You see, because color matter for truth's sake. All right, and again, colors, they come with certain vibrations, and it comes with certain thoughts. All right, and Esau Edom has used these to deceive the world. You see, but again, now, All right, we in the time to where he's being exposed, you see. So, just wanted to go into that. I don't artazaza by Naya Paulo as well. That was a beautiful edification through the spirit. Wa I don't artaza atam yashlay alata wablu as well. You have a good night. Wa shalom lakam, which is peace and to you all. Shalom, shalom.